Location: Ottawa. Year: 1914, 2010. People: Canadian government and German Empire. Imagine this: a country declares war, and then simply forgets to end it. Not for a year, not for a decade, but for nearly an entire century. This isn't a comedy sketch or a parody of bureaucracy gone wrong. This is the true story of how Canada and Germany were, on paper, at war from 1914 until 2010, without anyone really noticing. It all began in the summer of 1914. The world was caught in the violent storm of the First World War. Great powers clashed, alliances shattered, and the young Dominion of Canada, as part of the British Empire, joined the fight against Germany. Like many nations, Canada mobilized its soldiers, its economy, and its people for a brutal and uncertain conflict. Over 60,000 Canadians would lose their lives in those 4 years of trench warfare, sea battles, and desperate campaigns. But when the guns finally fell silent in 1918, the war didn't neatly end everywhere at once. Treaties had to be signed, protocols established, signatures gathered, parliaments ratified, and in the confusion of wrapping up one of the largest wars in human history, a small but critical detail slipped through the cracks. Canada, unlike Britain or France, didn't sign the main Treaty of Versailles in 1919. The Dominion wasn't fully independent in its diplomacy yet. Instead, Canada handled its peace agreements separately. And here's where the story turns bizarre. In the decades after the war, as the world lurched toward the Second World War, Canada and Germany's legal paperwork remained incomplete. They went through the motions of being allies and enemies again. Remember, Canada fought Nazi Germany from 1939 to 1945. But the original declaration of war from 1914 had technically never been nullified by a peace treaty. Think about that for a second. After World War II ended, the Cold War began, and space travel was on the horizon. Canada and Germany were still, at least on parchment hidden deep in the archives, locked in the First World War. And nobody really noticed. For decades, governments changed, prime ministers came and went, Germany was split in two and later reunited. Canadians vacationed in Berlin, German cars were sold on Canadian streets, and yet, by the strictest legal definition, they were still enemies in a war declared before the invention of the zipper becoming popular. It wasn't until the early 21st century that someone stumbled upon the oversight. A historian digging through the fine print noticed something peculiar. Canada had never officially signed peace with Germany after World War I. When the news broke, it caused more amusement than alarm. There were no tanks rolling across borders, no soldiers mobilized. Instead, headlines joked about the forgotten war and the world's longest-running clerical error. Canadians laughed at the idea of being at war with their favorite German beer brands, or that Oktoberfest in Canada might technically have been fraternizing with the enemy. But for diplomats, this was embarrassing. Imagine standing in a modern meeting in 2010 discussing NATO operations, trade agreements, or cultural exchanges, and realizing, wait, technically, we're still at war? It was the kind of absurdity that could only happen in international politics, where the tiniest missing signature could leave two nations in a century-long limbo. So, in 2010, yes, almost 100 years after the original declaration of war, Canada quietly signed the paperwork to end the conflict with Germany once and for all. What's truly fascinating isn't just the mistake itself, but what it says about history. Wars usually dominate headlines, but peace, the paperwork of peace, often slips into obscurity. For 96 years, the legal shadow of World War I lingered unnoticed, like a ghost haunting both nations. By the time peace was officially declared in 2010, the world had utterly transformed. Airplanes, nuclear power, rock and roll, the internet, all had risen and reshaped human life, while on a dusty shelf in Ottawa, Canada's war with Germany technically remained alive. The story of Canada's forgotten war is more than just a bureaucratic blunder. It's a reminder of how fragile human systems are, how even something as monumental as war can become a footnote when people stop paying attention. And maybe, just maybe, it shows us that peace, real peace, doesn't just depend on treaties and signatures. Sometimes it lives in the everyday actions of people who decide to trade, travel, laugh, and share beer together, no matter what the paperwork says. So next time you think of World War I as ancient history, remember this. For Canada, it didn't officially end until 2010, almost 100 years late. But finally, with a pen stroke, the war was over.